Thanks, ladies and gentlemen. For the next part of the event, I would like to introduce a well-known writer, journalist from Holland, who will now be your panel moderator. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Joris Luijendijk.
Thank you very much. A very warm welcome. I'll be the the panel moderator for the evening. I'd just like to tell you that Mr. Schmid has to leave. He would have loved to have listened in on the panel discussion, but he has his corporate plane to catch. And this was actually new to me, because I thought if you have your own corporate plane, then you can't miss it. You can't miss your own corporate plane, because it's like a car rather than a train. But it turns out you have a slot. And then the airport you're flying to, you also have a slot. So you're still in the same situation. And so that's why we should all congratulate ourselves for not having a corporate plane. And I sold mine too. We have a panel, as I said, and I'm quite excited to be allowed to chair it. This is a really interesting struggle intellectually, because we're basically designing freedom in virtual reality, as Ms. Clinton said. And it's a very different world. It's owned by corporations, for one thing, the internet. And when we were designing our freedoms for the physical space, it was mostly owned by governments. And we have three very interesting panelists, and I'd like to call them up to the podium. The first panelist is Tarek Nashnash, and a very warm applause. Tarek is from Tangiers in Morocco. He's a director of Software Center, a company, and he's a very active human rights activist. He has some fantastic stories of the sort of stuff that's been going on in Morocco. We'll hear much more from him later on. First, he's going to answer a question that I will put to every panelist. I will answer it myself too first. And the question is, if you could reincarnate as an animal, which one would it be and why? And I would like to be a monkey. Tarek, very warm welcome. Of what animal?
So I crowdsourced the question in Facebook and Twitter, and I got the firefly.
Sorry, a firefly?
The firefly, yep.
That's right, outsource. And why? Yeah, if you outsource it, you don't know.
Yeah, well, basically they said it's basically firefly is peaceful, so we are for peace. It's small, so it's weak. But also, if we have a lot of fireflies, if all of us are fireflies, we can have a big light and enlighten the world.
Wow.
There you go.
Yeah, people wake up a little bit. Yes, thank you. Our second panelist is Mr. Dijkhuizen, who is CEO for Ziggo, the biggest cable company in this country. A very warm welcome. Mr. Dijkhuizen used to be on the board of Fokker before it went bust. So this is a sort of a trip down memory lane here in the Fokker terminal. A very warm welcome. What's your animal and why?
Well, having been in aerospace for so long, you will not be surprised that I would like to be a bird.
A bird.
And then you may question, what kind of bird? And I was thinking, maybe I would like to be an owl, because that's an animal which is working at night. And if you can work at night, all of a sudden you have 24 hours per day for life.
That's right.
And also, an owl is a very aggressive hunter, while in the same time it has the image of being very wise. And I like that combination.
That's right. That's good, yeah. And that's why I like to be a monkey, because nobody takes you seriously. Our final panelist is Ju Prem Shaipan, who is the webmaster for Pro Shai Thai, which is Thai for the free people. And Mr. Schmidt mentioned her travails earlier. She is under threat of prosecution, not even for what she herself said on the website, but what somebody else posted there. And she could go to jail for many years. So, what animal and why?
Cat.
A cat.
I think being a cat, you can be yourself, you can be independent, and people still love you.
That's right. Well, we're going to delve into issues in a little minute. But before that, Leon Willems, who is the director of Free Press Unlimited, which supports journalists and bloggers in very tough places all over the world, is going to deliver a testimonial. A very warm welcome to Mr. Leon Willems.
A very warm welcome to all of you, Your Excellencies, esteemed guests, distinguished activists, worthy scholars, friends and partners. I've prepared notes, and I'm not as capable as to deliver a speech to you of 1 hour summing up everything that is going on. As a director of Free Press Unlimited, we try to support freedom of expression and internet activists, quality journalism in the most difficult countries worldwide. And I've personally observed what an important catalyzing impact the internet had on the kind of work that we do. So we're very happy with the internet. I'll try to bring you to our hemisphere, to our ecosystem where we work. We serve 2 million listeners daily in Sudan with our Radio Darfur program. Since more than 5 years, we're operating an internet radio called Radio Zamaneh, The Time, which has more than 10 million hits in Iran. And we're very proud of that because getting through to the population of Iran is getting more and more difficult. We have launched operations in Uzbekistan, Zimbabwe, Somalia, Afghanistan. All these operations would have been practically impossible without a free internet. So there's a lot to cherish. We've stared down oppression in some places, supporting the important people in Morocco and Tunisia and Egypt, and we've done that even when people were still supporting dictators in Egypt. But I'm also worried. Of course, we support the Silicon Valley standards. We also think it is very good that we have multi-stakeholder meetings like this, and we support the Global Network Initiative. I haven't heard anyone today asking attention to a very important report that came out by the Internet Freedom UN Rapporteur, Mr. Frank LaRue, who called for action on access to the internet. We think that there should be an implementation plan for that as well, because it's an important issue. But as my role as civil society, I'm trying to also share some of my worries with you. Because as much as we cherish the fortunes that the internet has brought to activists to fight repression, there are some concerns. I'm worried about the lack of binding legislation against dual-use technologies in Europe. You may not know this, but some of the countries that the Secretary of State was speaking about in Iran and Syria are actually traded through European companies. Why do we allow that to happen? Now, you may have mixed feelings about whistleblowers, but the question I put to you is, why do we need whistleblowers to expose companies that are exporting to these repressive regimes? What about our own ethical standards? Could we find a better solution? I'm also worried about the hundreds of journalists and human rights activists that are incarcerated, tortured, cyber dissidents, silenced, and killed in countries that do not reach the public domain at the moment. I speak about countries like Russia, Eritrea, Uzbekistan, Azerbaijan. In these countries, public dissent has totally disappeared from view, and democracy has become a sorry excuse. So I'm sometimes afraid that with the proliferation of all this technology, in fact, the internet could become a very effective way for the enemies of freedom of expression and freedom of the press to attack dissident voices. And we need to stop this. When we lose freedom on the internet, we lose major opportunities for positive change. I'm also worried. I'm a journalist by profession, and I want to share something that is close to my heart. I'm worried that many governments today, and many of the speakers before us have indicated and hinted at that. Many governments today are thinking about considering drafting defamation laws. Now, Free Press Unlimited encourages quality information, and we support independent information that is, based on the ethics of good journalism, and we know there's a lot of bad information floating around. We don't like it. We work very hard to improve it. But defamation laws are not the answer. So, just to give you an example, and I'm sure you can agree on this one, and then I get back to my point. In Zimbabwe this week, media monitors who report about fair elections and journalists were arrested on the basis of such a law, an anti-defamation law. Now, you will probably all agree with me that that should not happen. And in fact, some of your governments are actually funding us to set up such media monitoring. But what about the proliferation of anti-defamation laws in India and decency laws? What about anti-piracy legislation in the United States Congress that is also potentially threatening to kill internet freedom? How are we coping with those questions? Another thing that is of particular irritation to me, which I want to share, is that we're now almost a year after the events started in Tunisia and Egypt. And I don't know how it is with you, but I personally, having been a reporter covering the Middle East for roughly 15 years, I was just enormously encouraged by the uprisings that happened in the Middle East. They gave me oxygen. And I think that the people like Tariq, and we have other friends of us that you can call later in our stand, who have provided that oxygen. And they proved the cynics wrong. So how many of us, and I put this as a question, believed it was better to support the dictators in the past and believe and trust the people in the Middle East? But more importantly, are we still consulting enough with the activists in the Middle East at the moment? Who are we freeing? We have our concerns. So we think that there's a broad consultation, and we should go back to those people who created the space. And in the normal business of politics, we tend to get back to having government-to-government negotiations, etc. We should, the change is a very difficult process, and we're involved in it in many countries. It's very difficult, it's a long time. So we thank Google actually for inviting us to co-host this event, because it shows their true spirit, which is they asked us, bring us some of the people that have brought about change in their countries. So we have them here. We have Merve from Turkey, we have Bassem from Egypt, we have Tariq from Morocco, and we have Slim from Tunisia. So we ask you, do we still enough consult with these people when we define our policies? Free Press Unlimited and their partners are standing side by side with these oppressed individuals, individual cyber activists and journalists. Journalists who reveal what needs to be revealed, who promote the freedoms enshrined in the Charter of Human Rights. Are we still winning? Well, as far as we are concerned, we want to win and we need to win. Freedom online is too important an issue to leave to the whim of governments, private corporations, and multilateral organizations only. We need the civic voice here. We need the citizens' voice. Civil society can serve as a front soldier for democracy in countries at risk. WizKids, bloggers, journalists, activists, they are the agents of empowerment. They are the mobilization for change. We need to support them because people deserve to know, which is our company slogan. And that is why we prepared a call to action for you. A call to action which was already signed by 25 organizations worldwide. We have compiled them in the form of an agenda. We hope that each of you present here will endorse that agenda. It is a call to action which includes many of the things that were said by the previous speakers. And we urge the Ministerial Conference on Freedom Online to take fundamental action along those lines. Number one, we call on international and national corporations, IT firms, software developers. Can you please take protection of your users' human rights as a key point of departure when you develop, produce, and distribute digital technology? We'd like to see that. Number two, we urge governments at the Freedom Online Conference to formulate international legislation curtailing the export of dual-use technologies to countries where civil liberties are most at risk. Now, we know that in the spirit of multi-stakeholderism, yes, we need charters, we need codes, we need intentions, but it's also true that many of the companies that are exporting these technologies to repressive regimes are actually saying it's not against the law. So there is a point in designing these laws. Number three, we think that civil society, especially in Europe, has not worked together hard enough and has not joined hands. And we call on them in the field of internet freedom to join hands and to establish a protection laboratory. A laboratory that provides proactive support to cyber dissidents, to social media activists and web journalists, with a strong focus on countries where freedom are most at risk. And we call, as I said, especially on European organizations, because we see that our American partners are actually doing much more than we do in the European sphere. I think there's really a need for stepping up, and I'm talking to us ourselves as civil society. Number four, this is a point that always comes, and I'll try to say why it is still relevant. We need funds. And civil society organizations always say we need funds. And I'm not saying we need funds because we need funds. We need proactive money. We need to establish this protection laboratory and make sure that we can support those people that are attacked in Syria, that are under attack in Iran. We need to support them with technology so that we can still reach them with independent information. Because, for example, in Iran, the amount of information that still gets through with all the technology that we use is slowly draining down. And we need to get initiative, we need to get action to make that country still accessible. Such a protection laboratory could bring brains together from companies, would bring funds from governments, and we can deliver the trusted partners in the Middle East and all these repressive countries. In today's trans-global information society, internet freedom and access to information are key rights of citizens around the world. And they need to be strongly promoted, we believe, along the lines of this call to action. And we invite you all to come to our hospitality unit and sign this call to action. Thank you very much for your attention.